We know there are dumb things you've bought. Just admit it. Just come clean. It'll feel so good to come clean.
5 Hail Marys, and your gear acquisition syndrome has been absolved. Welcome to the Photography Opinion Podcast. We discuss all things photo, video, and camera related. I'm Ben Lucas.
And I'm Stuart Marlantis.
And this is Photo Op.
So as we've talked about at length over many, many episodes,
we talk about everything at length.
Well, but this in particular, the gear category, might be one of the most at length of any of the categories on the podcast. And we've bought a lot of cool stuff. We talk about our favorite stuff very frequently.
We do.
But what we don't talk about a lot is the bad and maybe the ugly.
No.
Occasionally, believe it or not, we do make bad purchasing decisions.
Are we emptying out all the skeletons in our closet this week?
I think so. I think many of these things are literally just sitting in closets.
Okay.
This episode,
my house doesn't have any closet, so all of my bad decisions are out on display on a shelf. It's lovely.
Yeah, when you move to the new studio, now you can display all of your
bad decisions.
But yeah, this week we're talking about the worst things that we have bought as photographers / videographers, I suppose.
All right, I'm gonna need to think because I've bought some truly stupid and useless things in my day.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
Okay, I have one. The very first one that comes off the top of my head, which people are probably gonna argue about, is a green screen.
Yeah, that's the first thing for me too. As we have mentioned a few times, we don't like, one of the green screens I own is one of the things that we don't like, which is going to be the honorable mention, which is behind me actually. The Gray Void is
the X-Drop green screen.
Is the X-Drop.
Stuart, how many times have you used the X-Drop green?
I have literally never used the X-Drop green. So when I got it, I got 2 backdrops at the same time, or 3. Yeah, I got them like as a bundle.
You got a gray, a white, and a green.
A white, and a green. And I'm like, oh, why not? You know, I'm doing this. Just get the green as well. I'll use it, right? No, I don't think I've ever used it. It just sits in the closet. And I have other green screens too. I've got pop-ups and stuff like that. They're just a hassle to set up. I get the utility, but
I just bought about $1,000 worth of different backdrops. Mm-hmm. I'm sure that won't be a bad purchasing decision.
Not at all. Not at all.
No, but when it comes to green screens, I actually own 3 of them, and I don't use them ever.
Yeah, I would say I own 3 or 4 as well. Yeah, somewhere in there.
Yeah. So the first one is I bought a pop-up that is chroma green on one side and chroma blue on the other. Mm. The problem with this pop-up is you can't shoot a full-length person on it. You either have to shoot a zoomed-in headshot horizontally or like waist up vertically, and the person can't like move their arms. Mm-hmm. So it's pretty limiting. I used it, I want to say in the time I've owned it 5 times, and 2 of those were in the past month. So like it's starting to get a little more use, but yeah, it was
That being said, it's hard for me, if you do want to experiment with green screens, it's hard for me to still not recommend pop-up green screens because they're so cheap. I feel like if you're going to experiment with them and decide, I don't really like doing green screen stuff.
That's true.
Then
it's like
$100.
Least
it's cheap. But are you really going to use it? I mean, maybe you will with more work from home stuff.
So the second one that I bought, it was on sale for $15 as a full 10 by 10.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, that's worth it just for the fabric. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Newer was having a sale on Amazon. They're like, hey, buy our green screen. Right. It was hella cheap. And this was at the beginning of the pandemic, but then it took like 4 months to actually ship to me. And then I stopped doing green screen stuff by the time that it actually came in. So That still hasn't been opened, but, $15. And then the third one, I technically didn't buy, so I guess you can't say it was a bad decision. But in one of my Facebook groups, someone said, hey, we have a roll of green seamless, but we are not in town production. So someone who actually lives here in Seattle, please come get it from us, or it goes in the trash. And I said, ooh, dibs.
At least it was free.
It was free, but it takes up studio space. I'm sure I'll use it one day now that I have auto pulls with rollers. But yeah, I didn't have a studio before, so I literally never opened it.
Yeah, green screen's just like, one, are you really going to make green screen content frequently enough that is worth it, if at all? And two, they're always like the wrong size or the wrong shape or too small, unless you can put in literally a cyc wall where you have this huge area. It's always annoying. I mean, like, the green screen for this one is similar to many pop-ups. The edges of this are just barely off camera, and if I put my arms out, my hands are now clipping on the outside of the green screen, and that's just useless for any stand-up kind of stuff. Yes, it does technically cover me completely when I stand up, but not my arms, and you gesture so much when you're speaking or presenting something, or at least I do, that it becomes largely useless.
I don't know how long we've been talking about green screens. It's probably been a good 4 or 5 minutes now, so I'll add one last thing, and then we'll go on with our list. Rather than, I shouldn't have bought a green screen.
Yeah.
So if you are doing video, green screens and blue screens are fabulous. If you are shooting photos, I hate them. Here's why. If you're doing video, chroma keying is a thing. You can chroma the green, and it does a really excellent job. For whatever freaking reason, it does not work as well in Photoshop. And when it does key, it leaves a green cast on your subject. Now, theoretically, it doesn't leave a green cast if you have a good 10 or 20 feet in between your subject and the green screen, but then your green screen has to be ridiculously large, and you need to have that much space, which, let's face it, we don't.
Yep. Yeah. But even if you're doing it for video, it's kind of hard to light green screens. Think about it. Just think about it.
Yeah. You probably want to go with white or gray.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say probably.
What's next?
Let's see. Mirror lens. I bought a mirror lens because it was, I want to say, in between $10 or $20. I'm like, oh, I'll give this a try, and it's just garbage.
But I love donut bokeh.
It's so bad. The donut bokeh looks so bad, and I did a test that I will one day do a real test and actually post it on the channel. But it essentially is the same quality as a cropped version of my 7200.
Yeah. It's
like, it's just,
you think on a budget this would be great, and it really is not, unfortunately.
It's not though.
I've got a lens one in the opposite direction, the Rokinon 14mm 2.8, the manual 2.8. Yeah.
Because I've been thinking about those. I've used some of those, like, Rokinon T lenses.
So here's why.
Wait, is it a T lens or no?
No, it's not a T lens. It's
okay.
The standard 14mm.
Okay.
So the T lens, their cinema lenses, basically, those are very good. I'm talking about their standard photo 14mm manual lens, and this isn't a bad lens. Like, it performs as you would expect, perhaps a little bit better than you would expect. It is a nice full frame 14mm lens. The problem with it is, I bought it. I was on more of a budget at the time, and I really wanted an ultra wide lens, and it was a good budget option. The problem was that less than a year later, I bought the 17-28 Tamron, and I literally have never once needed the 3mm difference between 17 and 14 millimeters. Now, a lot of people will say, at the wide end, 3 millimeters can make a big difference. I 100% agree. It definitely is substantially wider. Have I ever needed that difference when I could just walk back a little bit farther? No, not once.
Yeah.
So I hugely discourage people. Save your money. It would have been better for me to put the money from this 14mm into the 17-28. I almost I would almost say don't buy a prime ultra wide unless it's something very special, because boy, the wide zooms are so good now, and they're so much more flexible and so much more useful in my opinion. I like prime lenses. I'm not a prime lens hater. I'm just saying, like, in the ultra wide, I have just been so pleased with having a wide to ultra wide zoom, and you should not buy the Rokinon 14 millimeter.
So I have a funny anecdote about that.
Yeah.
So I bought the Sigma. I'm not even gonna try. Whatever the hell their super ultra wide 14 to 20 whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know the millimeter length. It's that same kind of thing.
Yeah.
It was ridiculously large, ridiculously heavy. It had one of those giant lens caps because it had a like almost fish. It was not a fisheye lens, but it had that fisheye kind of front cap.
Mm-hmm.
It was just so heavy. All my tripods and ball heads hated it because like it doesn't have its own collar. It was just this unwieldy monster. And then like the very first time I tried using it, it got bumped on something and the autofocus stopped working. I'm like, okay, it's obviously still under warranty. I'm just gonna send it back and have them fix it. And I had a big trip. So because it was my Iceland trip, I'm like, oh, let me rent something. I need a landscape lens. Let's rent just like a small prime lens that'll, get the job done.
Mm-hmm.
So I rented the Canon 20mm lens. Never looked back. As soon as I got that lens back in from repair, I sold it. And my 20mm lens I have loved forever. And I've just never really had a good zoom. I did have a zoom lens that I bought cheap, but like I got my money's worth out of it. I wouldn't say it was a bad purchase, but like it wasn't a good lens, and so I still preferred my 20 because it was like 28, and 28 to 20 is a huge jump.
That's a big jump.
Well, now I just bought a 2470, which I realized like on my last wedding of like, oh, do I even need this 20 anymore? But there was like one like interior shot that like I couldn't get because I'm in the corner of a room, and I'm like, oh no, 24 to 20 is still a significant jump. I still like this lens. It's small, it's nice, it's portable, great landscape lens. So there's something to be said for that.
That is true. And I agree with that. The funny thing in my case is that the 14 mil is substantially larger and heavier than the 17 to 28.
Yeah.
So
no. When you get
yeah,
that wide, the lenses get ridiculous.
It's huge.
The Canon 20 mil is about the size of a 50 mil. It is very small lens. So that is the huge difference there. Let's see
that being
what
said,
other...
there's probably some. I know I have on my wish list some amazing like ultra wide Laowa prime thing. They're out there. Occasionally, I look at them and think that would be a good idea. But the 70 to 28 is so good.
I have used the Rokinon T lenses. I like T lenses if you shoot video.
For sure,
but,
for sure.
Let's see. What other cheap garbage? Oh, okay. So I'm not going to call them out by name, but this was a Kickstarter, and the Kickstarter very much sucked at manufacturing, and by the time they actually delivered it, the fad was gone. It was prisms or filters or little glass reflective-y things that you stick in front of your lens, and it makes fun shapes. I've never used it. I think I've used it once on a paid job, and that was because I was shooting a Catholic wedding that had a photo pit, which means for 2 hours during the ceremony, they said, you must stand in this spot and you are not allowed to move. And I got bored. So I brought my prisms with me so that I would just be able to like play and kind of make something interesting while no one was moving or doing anything of interest for 2 hours. But that's the only time I've ever used it. I actually bought a prism that's like one of those just like bars that was very cheap on Amazon. But like the very first time I accidentally bumped it against something, it just like shattered in a million pieces. I'm like, oh, now it's a sharp piece of glass. It's trash now.
Yeah.
It's a fad. It's just... Meh.
This, you could totally, if you're somebody who's really trigger happy on Kickstarters, this could... the worst things you have bought could totally be like all Kickstarters / it might have taken so long to deliver that now you don't really care about it anymore. So yeah.
Oh, I definitely have some Kickstarter regrets but they're either like board games or
Yeah.
household items, or like, okay, that is a photography thing, but you've never delivered it, so does that count?
Side note, beware of Kickstarters. You can totally have the worst things you buy be Kickstarters.
Yeah,
Easily.
we have several episodes on that too.
What else have I got? This actually kind of is in Kickstarter land because you see these on Kickstarter all the time. Bags. There are so
Hey Stuart, I just bought a new bag.
so many. Well, so there are so many. See this all the time, and there have been a couple Kickstarters with very successful bag Kickstarters that are very successful. There are a million Kickstarters every year that say this is the best photo / video bag that has ever been made. You need to back us for like $300-400, and we swear that this is worth $1,000 and it's the most amazing bag. No bag is the perfect bag, unfortunately, at least in my experience.
Nope.
I have bought so many bags chasing after the perfect bag. I eventually came to the conclusion that I have a mental illness and there is no such thing as the perfect bag, and I need to give up.
It's called gear acquisition syndrome, Stuart.
Correct. But boy, do you want that perfect bag. You think, no, this is the one that's actually going to be the perfect bag. It never is. There's always something wrong with it. I have way too many bags. I have given people bags. I just need to offload all of these bags. And
you've given me some
I've
bags.
given you
but
some bags.
I have one of those like tote bins of bags.
Yes.
And what I will say is I actually did cull through a bunch of those bags and get rid of them. But there are some bags of when I go hiking, I like this bag.
That's fine.
When the new one I bought is more of like my hiking bag is very ugly, dirty, and unwieldy to use at like a wedding. So the new bag I bought is when I do weddings or city travel. I think this will be the bag. When I have to pack things that are in weirder shapes that are more boxy and not backpack like, this is the bag I like. So I do have some of those different bags for different purposes and kind of on the day decide, but you're absolutely right. There's no perfect bag.
And that's the way to do it. And actually, that's as weird as it is to saying I bought too many bags. I would also encourage people, instead of trying to chase after the one bag that you think will do everything, which a lot of these Kickstarters and companies say this is the bag that will do everything for you. You probably should have bags that are specific to a couple different things, travel and weddings and hiking and whatever. You might want to have 3 or 4 different bags that fit different purposes, and that is going to be a better setup than trying to chase the one bag, because chasing the one bag doesn't lead to happiness, and you just have tons of bags that you can't use. And also, quick side note, maybe look outside of photography bags. Maybe look at inserts for standard hiking bags or standard travel bags. Sometimes that can work so much better, and there's so much nicer bags because the money was put into making the bag or backpack or whatever really good, and not putting in gimmicky photography features. So side note, maybe look outside of camera bags entirely for your best bag.
The new backpack that I bought is a Manfrotto photo backpack. But I think it was designed with like mirrorless in mind. So I'm looking at their inserts. I'm like, oh man, did I just waste $200? Like, I'll do a review of it on the channel coming up here. But yeah, I mean, it looks very nice. We'll see. Let's see what else. Oh, when I first got started, I bought some really cheap flash triggers. I believe the brand was Cactus, but this was also circa 2009, 2010. So a lot has probably changed since then. But a light stand had a slight breeze. They tipped over. They cracked. So I think something happened with like the soldering. They were completely unreliable ever since. And I tried using them on a wedding, and they were working all day up until I went to do formal portraits with the bride and groom. And then that wedding was a disaster because everything was running late. Everything was bad. The church lady hated weddings, and she's like, this is gonna run on time whether the bride and groom are there or not. I'm like, have you ever been to a wedding before? That's not how that works. And she's like, you don't have any time for formal portraits. I'm like, what are you talking about? Yes, we do. And she looked at her watch, said, okay, you have 4 minutes. I'm like, great, I have 4 minutes. And then my flash stopped working because the triggers were stupid and cracked and cheap. And so the next day I went and bought Pocket Wizards.
Nice, nice.
They hurt my soul and my wallet, but I've never looked back.
Yeah, I have my last few items are in a similar vein. Cheap / crappy / knockoff stuff. Like, I'm a deal chaser. I want to be that person that's like, oh, well, I got this thing and it performs just as well as this other one, but it's so much cheaper. Notably in LED lights. I have a lot of LED lights, and they... it would have been better just to not buy any of them and just save the money for good LED lights. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't good deals out there. Like, Godox makes quite incredibly performing stuff for pretty cheap.
That's true.
There are brands out there that do that. Aperture, well, now Aperture's pretty expensive. It started out being a lot cheaper. But
Aperture was the knockoff, and
now it's really good.
And now it's really good, and they realize, oh, we're good. We're gonna charge more.
Yeah, like GVM stuff is a little bit janky, a little bit cheap, but it performs pretty well. Like, I'm not saying that there aren't cheaper brands that are good or are worth your while, but there's just so much crap LED lights out there. I've bought too many of them. Yes, they were cheap, but they end up not being used because either they're annoying to use or the output isn't nearly as good as you want it / expect it to be. For anything, light is the whole point almost at the end of the day for photo and video. Like, if you don't have good light, then what's the point? And buying crappy LED lights is just not worth your time, even though it seems like a good deal. Long term, you're going to replace them very quickly with something that's better, and it's not going to be worth it. Yes, there are cheap ones that are good out there. Do your research. Don't buy it just because it's cheap, because you will likely fall into the pit of it not being nearly as good as you think.
That's very true. I think the only thing left on my list, and I'm not going to throw out anything specific because this is not their fault. There was a bunch of stuff that had some really good deals Black Friday 2020, and so I'm like, oh sweet, I'm gonna do this. And then, like, I was busy and life was happening, and I'm like, I'll get to that probably next week. And it's been next week for 10 months now.
The lure of the deal.
They are still in the packaging. Again, it is not their fault. It is my fault. I'm sure they're lovely toys as soon as I get around to freaking using them.
Yep. Yeah. Right there with you. Just stuff because it's cheap in general is so dangerous. I have bought a couple cheap monopods that I regretted. Just buy a good monopod once. I think you just bought a new monopod, Ben, right?
I did, except it's on back order. I'm waiting for it.
It'll arrive eventually, but that one's not a cheap one. That is a very good one.
It is a very good one, yes.
And I would say the last one is knockoff action cameras. I have flirted with knockoff action cameras in the past, thinking, this is going to be good. And
when you say knockoff action camera, I have seen so many articles of like, whoa, is this camera going to kill GoPro? And then they do a comparison and they're like, what's the best? GoPro. GoPro is the best.
Yeah.
There has yet to be a competitor that has knocked GoPro off their top tier spot. Try as everyone may. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny to me because, yeah, the cheap one might get the job done, but if you have the choice, GoPro is still better.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, for all around, get a GoPro. Insta360 is not really, I wouldn't really call them a knockoff. They're kind of a different thing. They do stuff really well. Sony used to do stuff really well until they got out of the market. I wish they didn't. But yeah, all of the random knockoff action cameras, they're not going to be as good. Just save up your money.
So I actually just had a friend. He was trying to do a video shoot, and he had a third-party Chinese gimbal that I cannot even begin to pronounce the brand of. I will butcher it. It starts with an F, and it's Chinese. I'll let you figure out the rest. He pressed the power button, and black smoke came out of it.
Whoa.
And he's like, well, I don't have a gimbal today, so my video shoot is dead in the water, which that might be another episode on maybe having backup gear or how to think on your feet or something like that, because I mean, it shouldn't kill your whole shoot, but like, yeah, man, that's what you get when you pay $100 for a gimbal, when gimbals don't cost $100.
Dangerous. Literally dangerous.
Literally dangerous.
But yeah.
So yeah, those are the worst things I've bought as a photographer.
Yep.
What about you, listener? Let us know, what is the dumbest or worst purchase, the baddest investment, baddest, worst, baddest, the most badly investment you have ever made as a photographer. Let us know. hello@photo-op.show. Email us. What's the dumbest thing you've ever spent money on as a photographer?
We know there are dumb things you've bought. Just admit it. Just come clean. It'll feel so good to come clean.
If you have questions or ideas for future episodes, you can email us at hello@photo-op.show.
Watch us on Ben's YouTube channel at NomCreative.
As in Om Nom Nom.
Share this with a friend, and you can listen to Photo Op anywhere podcasts are sold.
Or download it. 'Cause it's free.